Alright, people, we are live. Hope you're well this eve. It's Sunday, 9th of June. Hope everyone's really well. It's great to be back on the Sunday live stream. Let us know what you've been up to, how you're doing in the chat. I'm your host, Lefty. This is the regular weekly Sunday live stream here on My Left Eye. Thanks for joining us once again. Lots of topics to go over this week. It's been a heck of a grueling week, to be honest, and a lot going on politically as well. Brett James, hope you're well. Thanks for joining us in the chat. And Sharon Whitlock, also, good evening to you too. Channel members, of course, Brett James and Sharon Whitlock, welcome back to both of you. If you're listening and you'd like to support the channel with a membership, that would be fantastic. A great way to show solidarity. You can do that for just 99p. Hit the link below. And if you'd like to join Brett and Sharon in the chat, hit the subscribe button. And you can do that just 60 seconds later as well. Please hit the thumbs up button as well. Give us a real boost on that old algorithm. And hope the broadcast reach more people. So yeah, so much going on this week. There's been the election debates, a lot going on with the campaigns for the general election as well, of course. The controversy over Sunak leaving the D-Day ceremonies early. Lots more going on in the news, as well as Unite the Union. Have a bit of a gripe with Labour as well. We're going to be going into that. Protests surrounding Gaza, plus the latest on that situation with the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Of course, as always, keeping you up to speed with the latest on that subject. Lots more as well to talk about. There's been calls for a potential ban on fossil fuel adverts. I'm going to be talking about that as well. The latest hot seats as well in the election. You saw the video that just came out earlier today. That's the latest update on that. I'm going to be briefly touching on that too. Plus a few comedy vids, etc. And a few other bits and pieces thrown in. So quite a chunk of things to get through this evening. Good evening to you too, me Thrill. Hope you're well. Thanks for joining us once again. It's great to be back on the Sunday live stream as well. And there's a few channel updates to come tonight also. Yeah, you might have seen some of those new features already, but I'm going to dive straight into a very big thank you to all of the channel members. I've updated the channel members list and I'm going to be saying thanks for that support and show of solidarity as we dip into the fondue lounge, as we always do on Sundays. So thanks a lot to all of you. Mr. Pike Bishop, thanks for joining us in the chat. No, you did not miss the fondue. We were just going into the lounge there. As we say, thank you to the channel members, including Venusian Teapot as well. Thanks for joining us too. Great to see you all back this evening. So don't worry, Mr. Pike Bishop. There's still plenty of fondue to go around. A Keith's large neoliberal pan. I'll be kicking off shortly with a comedy clip as well, just as we wait another minute or two for people to arrive. quickly fill you in on some of those channel updates as well while we're doing that. There's a new feature called Brews at 10, where I'm going to be doing as many weekday streams as I can in the run-up to the election. Talking about the latest ins and outs of that. There's going to be far too much going on through the week with the election and all the other geopolitical events going on throughout the world to fit it into the live stream. Otherwise they'd end up being about 3.5 hours long. So hopefully that'll help keep people up to speed as well. That's going to be daily from 10, the Brews at 10. Keep an eye out for that. I've also got a lot of hot seats to watch out for in the election. Like I said earlier, that video released just this morning. It was available last night for members on an early viewing, of course, but released to the public this morning. Talking about some of the ones to watch. Be having a bit of a chat about that later. But if you want to go into that in more depth, please do check out that video. Loving hearing your suggestions as well for those. Thanks a lot for those of you on recent streams who've pointed out a few of those, including one that's now on the list. Okay, this week's opening comedy clip's going to come from Jonathan Pye. He's probably going to be pretty active in the run-up to the election too. So that's going to be the latest one from him. I've got a few comedy clips and other bits to go in between all the topics going to be talking about tonight. Okay, hope you're all full of fondue for now. We'll be back in the lounge a little bit later on. Just going to queue up this comedy clip. Okay, here we go. This is Jonathan Pye's latest. Don't know if you've seen this one yet. He's on tour as well, I still think, so if he's coming close to you, do check him out live. He's very good as well. And big shout out to him. Give him a follow and whatnot on YouTube.
In the first of our series of special election reports, where we take a look at the issues that are going to decide this coming election. Now, when nearly 2 weeks ago Rishi Sunak fired the starting gun, he told us that when the Tories came into office 14 years ago, Labour had crashed the economy. They left a note, he said, saying that there was no money left. So that seems as good a place as any to start. So today we're looking at the economy. They've been banging on about that fucking note for 14 years. 14 years ago, outgoing Labour Chief Secretary to the Treasury left a note to incoming Tory Chief Secretary of the Treasury saying, "Dear Chief Secretary to the Treasury, all the money's gone." Which wasn't exactly a lie, but it was also clearly a fucking joke. You'll notice Labour aren't still talking about when in 1964 the outgoing Tory Chancellor left his successor James Callaghan a note saying, "Good luck, old cock, sorry to leave it in such a mess," which again wasn't exactly a lie, but again was also a fucking joke. When any Tory says that the last time Labour were in government they crashed the economy, they are lying to you. Labour did not crash the economy in 2008. In 2008, there was a thing called the global financial crash. Global financial crash. And that was caused by greedy bankers, disaster capitalists, and hedge fund managers. Hedge fund managers like, Rishi Sunak, Kwasi Kwarteng, and Sajid Javid. Interesting. One of the major factors of the 2008 crash in the UK was when hedge fund company TCI forced ABM to be sold to the Royal Bank of Scotland, which meant the Royal Bank of Scotland went tits up and the taxpayer had to bail it out whilst enduring years of brutal and sustained austerity, supposedly to help clear up the mess that the dodgy bankers had made, because apparently we were all in it together. Remember that? Well, guess who was a partner at hedge fund TCI at the time? Guess who made millions of pounds out of that very banking crash? Guess who made millions of pounds at the country's expense, at your expense, whilst everybody else suffered? Rishi Sunak. He made millions of pounds out of the very chaos he helped create. Rishi Sunak is personally more culpable for that banking crash than anyone who was in government at the time. And yes, Labour overspent, just a teeny bit, but they overspent on things like hospitals and schools and social care and bombing Iraq. They didn't overspend 37 billion on useless test and trace, 26 billion in uncollected fraud that Rishi Sunak personally let slip through his fingers, or 1.6 billion on a barge full of listeria. And now, just like 2008, there's no money left. Again! Only this time it all went to Michelle Mone. When the Tories crashed the economy, it wasn't because of global financial events, it was because Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng had a couple too many lines of gack and thought, fuck it, £45 billion of unfunded tax cuts for the most wealthy, that'll help the country to level up. The next time the Tories lecture anyone about Labour bankrupting the country, 2 words, Liz Truss. If right now you're facing a massive hike in your mortgage repayments, that's Liz Truss. She did that. Next time you hear them talk about fiscal responsibility, 2 words, Nadeem Zahawi, the tax-dodging Chancellor of the Exchequer, a man worth over £100 million who dodged millions of pounds of tax whilst making you poorer. He did that. Next time they mention getting inflation under control, 2 words, fuck you, we're not that stupid. Inflation might be slowing, but prices are still 20% higher than in 2021. And whilst they've all been profiteering and handing out billions of pounds in contracts to their rich mates, whilst claiming vast amounts on expenses with their fingers literally in the nation's till, they are making sure it's Angela Rayner's second home fraud that didn't actually happen that makes the front pages of the Telegraph. Whatever you think of Labour, I can't see them suddenly implementing £45 billion of tax cuts for the most wealthy on a whim. In fact, they're not going to do anything radical whatsoever. They are going to actually achieve absolutely fuck all if they win this election. You know why? There's no fucking money left. Well, tomorrow we're looking at the second most important topic for most British voters, and that's immigration.
Jonathan Pye there. Yeah. Spot on. What can you say about a lot of that? The media, of course, have a big part to play in this. The distraction, etc. Look over here. The very people that caused that financial crash that Jonathan Pye's on about there are now standing in the election. Do check out his tour, like I said. Great stuff live. Well, Mithril, you're saying Lancaster might be a potential hot seat. Its boundaries have changed since 2019, yeah. One of the constituencies where there have been boundary changes. More attempts to move the goalposts. That could turn out to be an interesting one. I'll try and take a look into that. Thanks a lot for that suggestion. Just before we go into some of the other stories, there are a couple of, excuse me, more somber things just to quickly point out. The TV and radio presenter Dr. Michael Mosley, who went missing on holiday on Wednesday, the body's been found, and it does appear to be that of the TV and radio presenter. That's a very tragic story there. He was walking through Greek island in temperatures of 40 degrees when he went missing. And a body was found earlier today. So it does appear that the body that was found had been dead for a number of days. So that's pretty tragic. Also, today marks the 10th anniversary of the passing of great political satirist, excuse me, and also a great comedian as well. The late great Rick Mail died 10 years ago today as well. Sorry to be leading into something quite so somber. I just wanted to get through this before we get on to other stories. So yeah, I'd actually like to do something a bit out of the ordinary on the stream, something I don't normally do. But I was a great fan of Rick Mail myself. He did, of course, portray the fictional Member of Parliament Alan Beresford Bastard, fictional MP for Halton Price, another great character, and was involved in so many other great institutional comedies, The Young Ones, comic strip, Bottom, etc. So this is a quick tribute to him. I'd just like to lead into a moment of silence while I lead this up and just pay tribute to the late great Rick Mail. And I do wonder, it does make it spring to mind what Rick would make of the shower that we've got now. He passed 10 years ago. Of course, I guess the issues around that time were mostly the Scottish independence referendum, for example. The Tories have been in for 4 years already began to snowball the austerity policies, of course, and Alan Bastard, who was played by Rick Mail, represented the Tories in the series during the 80s and 90s, but then again in the early 2000s, Rick Mail brought the character back as one that had defected from the Tories to Labour, which kind of, ironically, paradoxically, whatever you want to call it, reflects what's happening today with similar deflections, but he did that at the time just to highlight how close so-called Blairism was to the Thatcher politics of the 1980s, and well done to him for doing that. It begs the question what he would think about the politicians, be they in government or not, that we have at the moment, and that's going to lead me into quickly going over this election debate, the latest live TV debate from a couple of days ago. I didn't get the chance to do a full live stream for that as well. Also, there were other channels doing theirs at the same time. But I want to quickly go over a sort of highlights video, as you will, and just add my sort of opinion to what went on. I've not seen it in full, to be honest, since it was on, but there were a few highlighted moments. I'm going to skim over those. So it wasn't strictly a leaders debate either, this, of course. It was a bit of a mix, bit of a sort of hodgepodge of party leaders and other representatives. Fortunately, we weren't subjected to listening to Sunak or Starmer. They had the head-to-head debate just a few days before this one, and you know, it wasn't particularly inspiring stuff. Let's put it that way. But this one was slightly different. So you had some party leaders, but for the Tories it was Penny Mordaunt who's leader of the House, and instead of Starmer it was Deputy Leader Angela Rayner. So I want to have a quick look at that. There are some pretty interesting points to take from this. Yeah, I guess I'll go into this element first. I just want to line up the screen. As I mentioned, this one before we get into things. So yeah, on the left there, Farage. Now obviously this is leader/representatives election debate, so he's bound to be on this. But in so many other cases, over God knows how many years now, you'll see him on political shows, you'll see him on panels, despite never having won a seat in the House of Commons. Now, the party he's representing officially as leader now, as he declared his leadership a few days ago, and he's going to be standing in Clacton. He gets on, but the only reason that they had that seat is because of 30p Lee's deflection, obviously, from the Tories to Reform. I don't think there's an ice cube in hell's chance that 30p Lee's going to retain that seat. But my point being about what we see, how the media handle general elections, local elections, and politics in general. For example, why is there nobody there from the Workers' Party of Britain? Because they have one seat, which they won in a by-election, fair and square. It wasn't from a defection. Just to point that out as an example, because yes, I agree with George Galloway on what he says about Palestine, obviously a lot. On other topics, certainly not, such as environment, and he's said some other transphobic things as well, which I won't get into. However, he won his seat fair and square in a by-election. Nigel Farage's party, the Reform Party, have their one representative in the House of Commons by defection, but they think that his voice is worth listening to on a mainstream broadcaster so many times, and why they give him a platform at all just beggars belief, because he's just a proven xenophobe liar who tries to stir up hate based on race and these, awful xenophobic takes. So if he's there, then why should there not be, albeit other small parties, but who have won their seats, gotten their seats in the House of Commons in a far more legitimate way than the Reform Party have. And I still stand by my prediction that they won't have a single seat after this election. I don't think people in 30p Lee's constituency are going to be happy with them at all. But there were some more positive moments. Yeah, Mithra, like you're saying in the chat, from what I've seen, Carla Denyer did quite well in this highlights clip. She does point out how watching Angela Rayner bicker with Penny Mordaunt, isn't very cordial, isn't really great to see. People are sick of that. That's one of the reasons why people are sick of politics, as it were, in general. So she did very well to highlight that. I also think the Greens are coming into this election riding on the back of a lot of popularity, and they're going to make some gains from that as well, definitely. So I'll dive into this now, and obviously other representatives from the SNP, Lib Dems and Plaid Cymru. So these are some of the finer moments, as it were.
7 political parties, 7 leading figures who believe they have the answers to the UK's future. Welcome to the BBC election debate.
As we celebrate D-Day and remember those like my father and so many others who served this country so well, how will the parties ensure our army is ready and our country is safe from another major conflict?
Thank you, Francis, and thank you to all those that have served in our armed forces and continue to do so in what is a very, insecure world at the moment. First of all, Labour's committed to the triple lock on nuclear deterrent, especially...
Okay, just want to come in there. Obviously, we should commemorate the bravery of those who fought the far right 80 years ago and the sacrifices that they made. As I always point out on the channel, one thing we should remember as well is to not let ourselves get into a position again where we face these kinds of situations, and to always go for a peaceful pathway rather than a destructive one. Just referring to the gentleman's question there, I'm not sure why, as you're going to see with these responses, that the main parties are acting as though we should be gearing up for some sort of major global conflict. Do they know something that we don't? It's been 80 years since there was, a massive global conflict. Whether they're saying that what's happening in the Middle East could be the sort of cinder block that kicks off the whole thing, or whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or whether it could be other elements such as climate breakdown. And I'm not even overstating that fact, but for reasons I won't go into in detail at the moment. Just with Angela Rayner's response there as well, it's very sad to see that Starmer's Labour want to perpetuate with the nuclear deterrent of Trident, for example. This is one of the things that Rayner and Mordaunt are going to get bickering over shortly. But for what it costs and for what would result if we actually used it, I'd say it's absolutely terrifying and abhorrent personally. I'm all for scrapping Trident. It's supposed to act as a deterrent, but if you're prepared to kill millions and millions of people at the push of a button, just as a sort of what you see as an easy way out, albeit they might argue that they'd have no other choice at the time, but that's really not the moral side of history that I would like to be on as a citizen of the UK. That's for sure. That's for sure. And you're right, Mithril, she does look more and more robotic. The closer and closer she gets to Starmer, she's put her career first, obviously, more than her working class roots, where her background is, where she comes from. She's more worried about trying to retain a seat, and especially on the issue of Gaza, there have been mass protests in and around Manchester over this, and hers is one of the seats that could see a lot of people within a constituency turning their backs on her in the ballot. I won't be surprised. I'll just leave that on the back burner as a suggestion for now. But another example of how closely tied and aligned the Tories and Labour are. We keep getting example after example.
In the climate that we're in, which means we will keep our nuclear deterrent, that we will make sure that the 4 submarines are built in Barrow, and that we will continue with the upgrades.
Well, Francis, you're right to ask the question. We're spending less on defence than we were in the last.
Are they just... I'll give you a chance to reach for your sick bags as Farage comes in there. Are we gearing up for war against Russia? Is this what Labour and the Tories are trying to tell us? Is it? As we see Farage on our screens yet again. But for what reason? Who knows? I'm going to have to bring up this as he speaks, I'm afraid, as sort of way of keeping my blood pressure down.
Labour government, pro rata, the army has shrunk from 100,000 to 72,000. Recruitment is catastrophic. So rather than having a weird concept of national service where 30,000 youngsters would do a year, we need to recruit 30,000 people into the army full time. And yes, the veterans.
Right, it's brought up a couple of things there. Obviously, this national service thing that Sunak thinks is going to help him in the election. It's worth pointing out as well that it's always the people who write into the Daily Mail and the Tory graph and whatnot and say that, or a bit of national service will buck up the younger generation in this country, even though they're of the generation, I should say, that didn't have to do national service anyway. You know, brought that up before. It's obviously right-wingers such as Farage are going to have something to say about this. So the Tories are bringing back national service. Starmer is being very heavy on national security. And this is all out of nowhere. But is Starmer just, again, riding at the side of Rishi Sunak and trying to copy him every which way he goes? Or do they, are they potentially trying to tell us that we've made this world, put this world into such a state that we could be facing a global conflict, perhaps potentially soon within the next decade? Who knows? Who knows? It's not something that I haven't brought up before. Bit of a strange one. Bit of a strange one.
Veterans points been made already. Respect our veterans, including those with the average age of 100 who were deserted by the Prime Minister in Normandy yesterday, which I think was a complete and utter disgrace and shows us we actually have a very unpatriotic Prime Minister. It was dreadful.
So that's the D-Day evasiveness. Sunak making a quick exit and he's come under fire from all sides. Been forced into an apology about that as well. Not that I'm endorsing Farage. He's just obviously the one who had the first chance to leap upon that. And yeah, I'll just quickly go to an article about that. Penny Mordaunt, who's representing the Tories in this very debate, leapt to Sunak's defence after he left the D-Day commemorations early, and he's been forced to apologise since. Just quickly go over to this article, if you'll bear with me. Actually, I'm going to play through the clip because I think it does actually come up. What she actually said.
I think what happened was very wrong. I think the Prime Minister has apologised for that. But what I also think is important is we honour their legacy. They fought for our freedom. Unless we are spending the right amount on defence, we can't honour that legacy. If we become a target, you are less safe. It's too late for this generation of Labour politicians. That credibility is shot. Do not vote these people in.
Angela Rayner, would you like to respond to that?
Well, for a start, just quickly want to, excuse me, welcome Mike Bishop, Mr. Pike Bishop, I should say, to the membership. Thanks a lot for showing solidarity there. Hope you enjoy the perks. So hit the button and check out some of the advantages you'll get now that you're a member of the channel. You're very welcome. Thanks a lot for that show of solidarity. But the way Mordaunt was speaking there was completely cloth-eared. I'm not leaping to Labour's defence by any means, but the way that Penny Mordaunt was going on there, you would think that Angela Rayner had just stood there and said that she wants to scrap Trident, whereas she clearly said the opposite, that she wants to support triple locks on it as a nuclear deterrent. But the Tories are left with very few options in this election, and one of them, of course, is always going to be scaremongering, and that we are under some sort of threat, and that the Tory party will be the only ones that can protect us from this perceived threat, this imaginary threat, whatever crap they might come up with, whether it's the fact that your lives are so bad because of a few boats, or whatever other lie they might want to throw at you to try and imply that they're the only ones that can get us through whatever crisis it is. But she's not acknowledging the fact that the stance on Trident is basically the same as in Labour and the Tories.
Penny, you can keep pointing at me, but you're the party that have cut the armed forces, crashed the economy and left us in a real mess. Keir has been absolutely clear. I am absolutely clear. We will keep our nuclear deterrent and we will invest in it into the future.
It doesn't matter
we
what you're prepared to
absolutely
spend.
Clear on that.
It doesn't
so you
matter
can
how
tell
many
lines you want,
you
but
stand
we've been
next to
very
and have
clear
your
on that.
photograph taken. If your foe does not believe that you will use these weapons, the deterrent is gone.
Well,
and that's the position you're in.
Let me...
Well, yes, Penny, I know what a deterrent is. I know what a nuclear deterrent is. Don't need to try and explain it to me like I'm 5, or goodness knows why you'd have to explain that to a 5-year-old, but you know what I mean. And again, if is that what we're saying that we're prepared to do? Even if we do come under a nuclear attack ourselves. But surely, even from a military strategy point of view, aren't we more likely to be attacked by nuclear weapons because we have nuclear weapons ourselves? And should whatever foe, as she put it, or enemy, who would be nuclear armed, choose to do so, choose to attack countries, you'd dare say that they would attack the biggest threats first. And in this case, that would be those that had the capability of forming a counteraction with nuclear weapons. But they don't think about that. And also the fact that, as I said, you know, if we launch nuclear weapons at another country, that means untold death and devastation, just completely unnecessarily. And it's, you know, this is this is something they're going to have a bit of a bicker about here.
This is what will happen.
Here we go.
if you elect these people.
We've become a laughing stock internationally because of your party.
Well, of course, the whole world turned its back on us when we invaded Iraq under Labour as well, of course. But speaking of laughter, I just want to point out that after this little exchange, you know, they were seen sharing a laugh with each other, and Angela Rayner, quite in a friendly fashion, putting an arm on Mordaunt's shoulder as they shared a laugh about something else. This is all just for show, of course, you know. I don't have to explain that. That goes without saying. They're just trying to grab as many punchy sound bites as they can in these election debates in the hopes that they'll make the news rounds the following day and whatnot. But this sort of scene that we're seeing being played out here, them two not getting along, is completely for show. It's for the cameras. Behind the scenes, we know that they're very closely allied on so many matters.
Keir Starmer has changed the Labour Party. We're very clear on our number one priority is to protect our.
Let me bring in some more parties on this question.
Let's be clear about what happened yesterday. It was not only politically shameful, but I think many of us feel.
Do you know? Well, just a very quick point here. Sorry to, this is only a very minor thing. I've noticed this in the past though, it's just this is an opportunity to bring it up. Just skip past a moment there. As we're going to hear from the other parties on the issue. When Farage has to look to his left or to his right, he seems incapable of moving his neck, just simply swiveling his neck or his head left or right, one way or the other. That could be down to the fact that he is, of course, a human-toad hybrid. Let us know your theory on the matter. But you'll notice here when he turns around to his left, his whole shoulders and body have to move with his head. It's almost like in a military drill fashion, for example, or I'm not sure what you'd compare it to. But have you noticed this before? Because I certainly have.
Parties on this
I spy with my left eye something beginning with toad.
question.
Let's be clear about what happened yesterday. It was not
Oh.
only
No.
politically shameful, but I think many of us feel personally quite insulted. I started yesterday morning watching a recording made by the Royal Mint of my late grandfather, where he recounts catching his best friend who fell from the top of a Sherman tank, who was shot in the head. And as he waded through the water, he recounted in his words, men blown to pieces, hands, legs, and heads. If he had been there yesterday and seen the Prime Minister walk away from him, I would have found that completely, as I do now, find it completely and utterly unforgivable.
I think what we saw from the Prime Minister was panic, and I think it's the same pre-election panic that gave us that back of a fag packet plan for a new national service, which those in the armed forces have said that wouldn't be workable, let alone what it means about what the Prime Minister thinks of our young people.
So, I'm about to start studying medicine at the University of Manchester. How will the parties ensure I can graduate into a fully functioning NHS?
Since the Tories took power, I was a home care worker and I represented public sector workers across the North West and nationally, and the decimation of the social care services and the infrastructure around community services has actually not only left us without that community care, but it costs more in the NHS. Far too many people, especially our home care worker and I represented public sector workers across the North West and nationally, and the decimation of the social care services and the infrastructure around community services has actually not only left us without that community care, but it costs costs more in the NHS. Far too many people, especially our older generation, we've just been talking about D-Day and our veterans. They're on trolleys for hours on end, not getting the care they need, but it costs more money to do that.
Oh, balls, I was muted. Apologies. Yeah, I was just saying, Flynn, looks like he can't wait to get in there and say just how comparable Labour are to the Tories, and also what Wes Streeting's going to do to the NHS if he gets his hands on it. And I was pointing that out to a friend just recently as well, a member of the NHS who told me that she was thinking about voting for Labour. That's just all I was pointing out there. Sorry about that.
Care, but it costs more in the NHS. Far too many people, especially our older generation, we've just been talking about D-Day and our veterans. They're on trolleys for hours on end, not getting the care they need, but it costs more money to do that. So we would put home care services in.
There are many things we need to do, but there are two really important things. We have to keep the budget strong. You need a strong economy to do that, and public spending is going to go up.
It's just so generic. Gets a strong economy, strong this, strong that. I mean, this is, you know, going back to Theresa May, the strong and stable stuff and all this, and it's a bollocks. You know, her stand up and fight thing at the Tory conference as well was such an embarrassment. But that's all that they've got to, you know, keep a strong economy. They've trashed the economy. And whether you use that as a yardstick for people's actual standard of living or you don't, they've been crap on it anyway. The economy is not something that they want to be highlighting as being the strengths amongst their arsenal going into the election, but they treat people as though they're not the party that have been in charge since 2010.
Go up. It will go up, and for the NHS, very substantially. But the second thing we also need to do is increase the number of healthcare professionals we have. We have been doing that. We have 70,000 more nurses, for example, but we need to retain people in the service.
Where I live in Essex, I'm struggling to find a house. I've noticed the roads.
Just quickly before we go on to that housing issue as well, what she was saying there about trying to retain NHS staff. They're leaving in droves. They are leaving in droves for private healthcare firms who can afford to pay them more, but that's awful as we get closer to an American-style healthcare system, obviously. Any time that they strike and try and highlight just how bad their pay is, and they bore the entire brunt of the COVID pandemic, this NHS staff, they deserve to be paid fairly. They deserve to be paid well. They're asking for an over 30% increase in the pay. I say that they deserve at least that, and that's not an unreasonable ask by any stretch of the imagination. But when that happens, people like Penny Mordaunt and the Tories just completely vilify them. They call them greedy. This is our NHS staff. This is the backbone of this country's health and well-being. And they will leap on them like a pack of angry dogs. And that's the real Tory party. Now, they can't act like that and say that they care about returning NHS staff, because that is just a complete insult to people's general intelligence. Phil McCracken, thanks a lot for that awesome show of solidarity with 10 gifted memberships. Hope all of you new and returning members enjoy those perks. Thanks so much for that, Phil. Hope you're very well this evening. And for those of you who are new to memberships, just hit the join button. You can check out all of the advantages you'll get for being part of our community here, including early viewings and exclusive content, etc. So a very warm welcome to you. So it appears that the subject of, that's all I'm going to say about the NHS for now, it appears the subject of housing is about to come up after this clip. I'll just go back after one or two other issues, but now housing, and this is a massive one in terms of people's choice for who they're going to vote for. We've got a huge housing crisis in this country. So many empty properties, yet so many homeless people who have fallen through the net. We do have a severe lack of social housing, as we have done for generations now, and neither the Tories or Labour look set to fix that with their plans, obviously. We've been left with the Tories for the last decade and a half, but Labour's pledges, promises, even if they do come through on them, aren't enough for me. Let's see what the question was that came up on this topic. Thanks again, Phil, for that. The 10 gifted memberships, awesome stuff. Thank you, mate.
It will go up, and for the NHS very substantially. But the second thing we also need to do is increase the number of healthcare professionals we have. We have been doing that. We have 70,000 more nurses, for example, but we need to retain people in the service.
Where I live in Essex, I'm struggling to find a house. I've noticed the roads are busier and it's almost impossible to get a doctor's appointment. I think immigration is partly to blame. What are the parties going to do about immigration?
Migration is absolutely essential to our public services, it's absolutely essential to our businesses, and it's absolutely essential to our economic growth. And what we need to do is end the demonisation of migration.
Farage didn't look happy there.
We have a declining working age population, despite a net number of people moving from the rest of the UK to Scotland. We need migrants, and this race to the bottom on migration, driven by Nigel Farage, followed by the Conservative Party, and hotly chased by the Labour Party, does not serve Scotland's interests. And it does not serve your interests either. So rise up against it.
If you meet a migrant in the NHS, they're more...
Yeah, just quickly before we go on to hear what Carla Denyer had to say, I think Stephen Flynn's point there was absolutely correct. That was a priceless picture there, Farage's face as he had the truth put to him, and Rayner and Mordaunt definitely looked awkward as he called the two parties there out as well. I am a big fan of Stephen Flynn and what he does in the House of Commons, especially during PMQs as well. I thought he was particularly good during this debate as well. There was only one issue that I did have a bit of something, an issue that I had an issue with, as it were, and that was when he started to attack Labour for their apparent plans on green energy. And, you know, I'm no massive critique of Stephen Flynn's. Like I said, I hope the SNP do very well at the next general election in Scotland. But he did imply that Labour's plans for green energy, not that I have any confidence of them coming through on them, would cost 100,000 jobs. I don't know if he was just referring to Scotland specifically. Of course, we have massive North Sea oil reserves, or if he was referring to the entirety of the UK. But I know for a fact that that isn't correct, and I know that he's trying to woo voters here in this election. But I do think, you know, with the state of Labour and the Tories at the moment, you can easily critique them by being honest, and all of those jobs that exist within the fossil fuel industry are capable of being reskilled and transferred over to green energy, which would create lots more jobs, not actually cost us jobs. So that's my only critique of what I've seen from Stephen Flynn's contributions. But what he had to say there about immigration was absolutely bang on the nose, 100%. Yeah, this country relies on immigrants for fully functioning public services that he mentioned as well. So many areas are understaffed, and that, of course, has been amplified since we left the European Union and freedom of movement, etc. So, couldn't agree more. Carla Denyer, as I said earlier, and I'm sure it's the same for you, was one of the highlights as well from this debate. So let's hear what she had to say about this.
more likely to be treating you, as I was the last time I saw a GP, than being ahead of you in the queue. Migration's been a good thing for this country. And so in the Green Party, our immigration policy is not about arbitrary numbers. That's why we're not talking about caps. Instead, it's about making our immigration system fairer and more humane.
Lorenzo, the truth of it is, this ought to be the immigration election.
Need to pause it there. Just need to pause it there. Don't worry, folks. I'm on it. Thanks. Oh, yeah. Phil, thanks a lot for pointing out in the chat. It was 100,000 jobs in Aberdeenshire that Stephen Flynn was talking about there. So, obviously, if immigration's going to come up, they're going to give Farage a chance to throw his 2 cents in here. Denny was on form there. Let's see what the Toad Man has to say.
Because whether we talk about housing, whether we talk about the fact that rents are up between 20 and 30% in most of the country in the last 4 years, whether
just want to take the Lady Bird book, Why the Fuck Is This Prick on My Screen Again, off for a second, just to show you reaction from the audience. They're having none of it, you know. He's been found out a long time ago. What he said at the start there about this should be the immigration election. He tried that last time. You know, we had the so-called Brexit election last time. He was the instigator of the notion of the UK leaving the EU. We've been there. We've done that. People, you know, got absolutely sick of talking about it for a while as well. Whether you think it was a good thing or a bad thing that we did leave the EU, but that's not what this election is about. Certainly not. I mean, for example, Starmer is avoiding any talk of rejoining the EU, as are a lot of the other parties, except the SNP, of course, who try and highlight how ridiculous it was that most of Scotland voted to remain, but they've been dragged out of the EU. That's another issue entirely, but just look at this reaction from
talk about the, fact that
the audience. No, mate. No, mate. No, I'm not having that, mate. And it's all... There's another good bit later on where I think it's Mordaunt says something, and then there's like literally one person that claps, you know, what you, like you see in comedy shows, just almost a, you know, but that happening in real life. Yay! That's all. Jesus Christ. Look at what we'd left to fucking vote for here. Awful. But they're not having it. They don't want to have it. A lot of arms folded there as well.
To the country in the last 4 years, whether we talk about the roads, whether we talk about infrastructure, we are living through a population crisis, an increase of 10 million people since Mr. Blair came to power, and frankly, it's making us poorer. It is diminishing our quality of life.
Nigel, I don't know if you've got a calendar in your house anywhere, or if you know, however you choose to tell the time. It's 2024. Tony Blair was elected in 1997. Oh, that wasn't even in this millennium, let alone decade, Nigel. This election is about what we've faced since 2010 and all of the elections since then, and that has been absolute misery poured on this country by the right wing, including people such as yourself. Unbelievable. What a prick.
And it's nothing to do with race or any of those issues. It's to do with actually putting...
Of course it is, you race-baiting
My
arse.
husband and I both work. We've got good jobs and we're not eligible for benefits. Our lifestyle isn't extravagant. What we earn goes on gas, electricity, mortgage and food. We are working to survive.
No, I'm sorry, dear. You've spent it all on avocado on toast and apps. Yeah, that's what you've done. That's why you're poor. It's your fault. It's your fault. You know all these billboards we put up around saying, buy this crap that you don't need? You know what you've gone and done? You've gone out and bought all that crap that you don't need, and now look at you. You're poor. It's nothing to do with austerity. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That was tongue-in-cheek, by the way, folks. Just to, you know.
Not live. This isn't sustainable. Who will change things for working people?
Keir Starmer confirmed this earlier this week. They are going to put up your taxes by £2,000.
That's a lie.
By £2,000 per working household.
Again, no fan of Starmer's, but that is total bollocks. It's been debunked for a few days now, and that she's trying to spin that out again. It's just embarrassing.
Your government
Here we go.
raised taxes to the record level in 70 years.
The last
we
Parliament, and we've hated
26
putting
different
taxes up. We have now been cutting taxes. We will continue to cut taxes. The country can...
And they gloat about it. They gloat about cutting taxes. And people wonder where the money's going to come from for investment in public infrastructure. They gloat about it as though that's a good thing. But that's obviously what the Tories are all about, and the right wing in general, you know. Small state, low taxes, just let the market will sort it all out, and we'll all be fine. But no, people want public investment. Most people don't mind paying a little bit more tax. And what should definitely be happening is huge taxes on the wealthy. Of course, the Tories don't want to do anything about that. Labour probably won't do much about that either.
Afford it.
You're using
£2,000.
You're using a figure that's been criticised by the UK statistics watchdog.
Costings and Labour's
Why don't you stand by your record? Record levels of taxes on working people. 26 separate tax hikes in the last Parliament.
About 12 new taxes that
rubbish.
Labour are going to bring in.
Absolute
It's not
rubbish.
Are you going to take out of your manifesto?
We've been clear how we would pay for our manifesto.
you haven't.
Okay, it's time to hear from the others.
Mordaunt asked Rayner there if Labour were going to take it out of the manifesto. The manifestos haven't even been published yet. What is she talking about?
Angela Rayner, it's time to hear from the others. Carla Denyer.
Well, that was terribly dignified, wasn't it?
Why is it when parties want your vote, they promise things, but when they're elected, nothing gets done?
We heard promise after promise after promise from the Conservatives at the last general election. 40 new hospitals, 6,000 GPs, and all the rest. And the fact is that this Parliament has been characterised by law-breaking, by lying, and by the economic illiteracy of the mini-budget. And of all the things that the Conservatives have broken, the worst thing that I think they've broken is people's hope.
Do you remember going back on the tuition fees pledge?
That's a sore subject for us, for sure.
What matters to you more, economic growth or successful climate policy?
We can create that economic prosperity that we need to build a brighter future for our country, hand in hand with looking after the environment.
It's not a choice between one or the other. The climate crisis should be the biggest concern at the moment, and you know, the long term, and now the increase in the short term as well. It's not a choice between having a good economy and tackling the climate crisis.
It is why Plaid Cymru calls for the devolution of the Crown Estate, as has happened to Scotland, but they won't do it to Wales, so that we can invest in making the most of our natural resources, in extracting power out of the wind and the tide. It's why we need to see Wales being paid the £4 billion that is owed of the investment in HS2 rail in England. Wales is contributing towards that, even though there's not a mile of that railway in Wales.
It's absolutely right. The point I want to make is, with renewables, the wind and tidal that were mentioned there, this would massively reduce people's annual energy bills. And guess what would be happening with the money that working families, were saving on energy bills? They'd be spending it in other areas and helping to stimulate the economy at a local level and at a national level. They'll have more money to spend in local shops, for example. They'll have more money to contribute towards the economy. It's not as though that money is just going to vanish, you know.
And we need that in order to drive people onto public transport through investing in connectivity in Wales.
But it is time now to go to the party's final thoughts.
After 14 years of chaos, it's time for change.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer has changed the Labour Party. Our fully costed plan for Britain will secure our economy, will bring down NHS waiting times with 40,000 new appointments every week, and will secure our borders, not with gimmicks, but with a credible plan to smash the gangs. We'll create great British energy, bringing down bills and creating thousands of well-paid jobs. We'll boost neighbourhood police to tackle antisocial behaviour, and we'll hire 6,500 new teachers. So if you want change, vote Labour.
The Tories are finished, so the choice is simple. Who do voters best trust to put Scotland's interests first in Westminster? Now, in the SNP, we know what it is that we believe in. Investment in our NHS, action on the cost of living crisis, rejoining the European single market, and creating economic growth by delivering on net zero. Unlike the Labour Party, we will never, ever get comfortable with the Westminster status quo, and we will always fight for Scotland's right to choose its own future. So on the 4th of July, vote to put Scotland's interests first. Vote SNP.
We can all see the Tories are toast, thank goodness. But we deserve better than a Labour Party that is offering more of the same. Angela says that Keir has changed the Labour Party, and she's right. He's changed them into the Conservatives. Frankly, our children deserve better. The Green Party is on the cusp of breaking through in seats up and down the country. Green MPs will never stop defending our future, protecting our NHS from privatisation and pushing the next Labour government to do better. We deserve real hope and real change. Vote Green.
This evening, I've been able to stand up for Wales, yes, but also for a different kind of politics that hopefully has been able to feel relevant wherever you are. My vision is a positive one. This isn't as good as it gets. The Conservatives are gone. They are finished, and it can't come quickly enough. But there is a real chance here to send Labour a message too. Stop taking Wales for granted. It is true that communities throughout the UK feel as if they are being ignored. Well, I won't let Wales be. So vote Plaid Cymru on the 4th of July.
We've come through tough times, and now there is a choice to be made.
This is it with the
You can choose
solo clapper.
Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer and get higher taxes, higher bills, and have your pension raided. Or you can stick with us and the plan that is working. We will cut your taxes, we will protect your pension, and we will defend this nation. For a more secure future, vote Conservative.
The one person there. Oh, I just have to do that again.
Defend this nation. For a more secure future, vote Conservative.
God. Oh God, you could tell she was dying inside as well, just with that one person clapping in the background as well. I'll just quickly go over some of the comments as well. That was classic. That was a classic one. Yeah, Phil, you're right. I mean, 80% of Scottish energy is renewable, but they pay more in bills than anywhere in the UK, and they have to pay to supply the grid. That is not the way that renewable energy should be handled. That is, obviously a massive rip-off. And of course, it's all got to be nationalised as well, whatever happens, because you see when these things, that's what leads to this. That's what leads to massive, I mean, so many people, millions of people, burdened at the moment by their energy bills. While these companies are making record profits, it, beggars belief. Welcome back, Mithril, as well. And that bit was true about Starmer changing the Labour Party. Absolutely 100%. Featured that clip as well as Angela Rayner and Carla Denyer as well in the last vid this morning. The Played Cymru guy was pretty impressive too, yeah, I agree with that, Phil. I believe that Wales has been neglected or taken for granted by Labour for a very long time too. People didn't used to take the SNP seriously when they first started out as a party. Now look at where they've gotten to. There's nothing to say that the same can't happen in Wales as well. Yeah, how can Penny Mordaunt say that with a straight face? Oh yes, Botox. A nice one, Mithril. Just once more on the... My goodness. If you want to sum up what's going to happen at the next election in one little soundbite, this is it.
And we will defend this nation. For a more secure future, vote Conservative.
Yay! Yay! Stand up and fight!
Our country is crying out for change, and it's not hard to see why. Under this Conservative government, everything feels broken. Nothing works. Under Ed Davey's leadership, the Liberal Democrats will fix our NHS and social care, tackle the cost of living crisis, and put an end to the scandal of filthy raw sewage being dumped in our rivers and streams. Every vote for the Liberal Democrats is a vote for a fair deal and a vote to help deliver the change that we all so desperately want and need.
Unlike the other six, I don't need an altar cue. I'm here because I believe in what I believe in. Our politics isn't working. You've heard these pathetic arguments tonight between the two big parties.
Before Farage goes off on his little tirade there, the Lib Dems, I want to quickly point this out. They've been particularly quiet over recent years. Obviously, they took a massive hit at the last election. They got left with just 11 seats. But they're going to be making gains, and it, looks like it's going to be by stealth. For all the hoo-ha over how many seats Reform are going to pick up from the Tories, I'll let you know it's 0. I think the Lib Dems are going to be making a massive amount of gains there as well, but no one's particularly talking about them. They seem to be doing it on the quiet, but that's going to be one of the elements to this general election for sure.
Parties, really, there isn't much difference. But electorally, Labour are going to win. The debate is who forms the opposition in the next Parliament? Who fights for the rights of ordinary British people? Who fights to control our borders? Who fights for men and women running small businesses? Reform UK is about to become a political phenomenon, an historic one. So I urge you, join...
Right, leaving that there. He's not going to get a seat. This is his 7th time of asking. Yeah, he's done all he can to ride off the back of his right-wing xenophobic policies, that's for sure. Complete prick. Okay, we're going to move on from the election debate. Thanks a lot for your comments on that as well. Anybody else who'd like to join the comments who's listening, please do hit the subscribe button. You can join the chat just 60 seconds later. Very warm welcome to the new members who've joined on the chat this evening. If you'd also like to show solidarity and become a member, you can do so for just 99p. Hit the join button. Lots of exclusive perks for you to enjoy, including static emojis on streams such as this one and exclusive content. So please do consider supporting the channel in that way, or if you're watching back on a replay, please consider using the super thanks or going to the Buy Me a Coffee page. You can find that link in the video and channel description. Just want to highlight another few quick news stories before I get into some more clips. That's enough from Nigel for now. Just going to bring up a few articles here. Just bear with me one sec. So yeah, very quickly, Mordaunt was forced to leap to Sunak's defence about him departing that D-Day procession earlier. We've just been through that on that election debate as well. But something else that's very interesting to Labour's campaign as well is that the biggest union in the country, Unite, have refused to endorse the Labour manifesto under Starmer, and there has definitely been a lot of back and forth between Sharon Graham, the leader of the Unite Union, and Keir Starmer over recent years, since he became leader of the Labour Party, of course. But I think this is potentially huge. So while we're still waiting for all the party manifestos to come out, they've gone so far as to say that they refuse to endorse it, saying it doesn't go far enough on protecting workers' rights and jobs in the oil and gas industry. And Labour have definitely been under par in supporting strikes, etc. under Starmer. He's tried to go to the right on that issue as well, criticising people who choose to use their hard-fought right to strike. The fact that this is the Labour Party, a party founded on unions and workers, just adds further insult to that. But Sharon Graham has previously warned that there were, quote, no blank cheques for Labour. And the unions are another example, like I've mentioned with Wales and Scotland, that Labour have taken for granted in the past and recently as well, of course. Starmer's responded saying, we've got a very good package for working people. This is the biggest levelling up of rights for a very, very long time. I hate that phrase, levelling up. It's just the way that Tories have tried to rebrand equality. They've created the position of, you know, minister for levelling up, and it's just an absolute facade. It's absolute bollocks that Starmer's willing to go along with that. Is equally appalling, but they're not even calling for basic things like a decent minimum wage. Even the Tories have outflanked Labour to the left on issues such as minimum wage recently. Not even calling for £15 an hour for NHS staff, let alone a general minimum wage. This points out that party rules, specifically Clause 5, require the final manifesto to be signed off at a special meeting of the Shadow Cabinet, the Parliamentary Committee of Labour MPs, the Scottish and Welsh Labour leaders, the chair and vice chairs of the National Policy Forum, the National Executive Committee, and representatives of affiliated trade unions. That would, of course, include Unite. Clause 5 does not require all stakeholders to agree to the manifesto for it to be valid, but there's no formal vote. And party sources say that the document was approved by round of applause. And something it looks as though Starmer's going to try and throw in late in the day, this recognition of a Palestinian state, I would take with a huge pinch of salt. I'd be very worried about that. He's seen how he's backed the wrong horse on this issue very early on. He fell onto the Israeli side. We obviously have been through the reasons for that on the channel before, lobbying, etc. But now that the weight of public opinion has come back to bite him in the arse, he's tried to throw out this policy at the last minute to try and gain some support from people who support Palestine and want to see a ceasefire in Gaza. But it's far too little, far too late. We can't forget about the huge numbers of Labour MPs who abstained on a ceasefire in November last year, or Starmer's comments on LBC about Israel's right to cut off power and water, etc., that have come back to haunt him. This is no shield against that. I'm pretty confident that most people, especially those who do support Palestine, will be able to see past this as well. Because I certainly don't buy it. Yeah. If Keir Starmer told me my own name, I'd have to go back and check my birth certificate, you know. So let us know what you think about that. That's pretty big, I think, for a party founded on the unions to not be endorsed by the biggest union in the country. Certainly speaks volumes for me. You're right there, Phil McCracken, in the chat as well. Recognition when Israel does something it cannot and never will do, and a built-in get-out clause, like when they hijacked the SNP motion day. That was appalling. I remember watching that as it happened. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. These are the lengths that Labour are prepared to go just to get into power, for power's sake. Don't forget about that. Very warm welcome to Odin Allfather as well on the chat. Hope you're well. So while we're on that topic of Palestine as well, I'll go over to some of the latest on that. Oh, another free shout out to members. Left that clip in there. There you go. And there was another huge demo in London on Saturday, just yesterday as well, of course. And other protests all across the world. This was a particularly huge one in the White House itself. And obviously these are fantastic to see as well. People really do need to call out America for their role in this whole thing. They may have recently started to bend a little in criticising Israel for the assault on Rafah, something that they've said that they don't want to be a part of, but that doesn't shirk a responsibility for what's been going on for decades now, and how America have been involved with that. So there was a huge protest at the White House. Over 100,000 people were involved, and they actually managed to form a massive circle around the White House itself with 100,000 people present. I mean, when you talk about the weight of public opinion, it just goes to show that people are now starting to put real pressure on world leaders. Some elements of that are being effective as well. This is why we've got to keep standing up and speaking the truth to power as well. I'll be touching on that very shortly as well, how the IDF could potentially be getting blacklisted as well. Here's some footage from the actual ring around the White House.
Murdoch for sure.
Oh, beg your pardon.
The Prime
Beg your pardon. Third time lucky.
Up with liberation!
Spoiler alerts. incredible scenes there. I'll just play that on in the background with the volume down while I point out what a great turnout that was as well. And you're right to point that out in the chat, Phil. Yeah, if Trump gets in, we're either going to be in the same situation or worse as well. The unfortunate thing with American politics is that that clear, firm two-party system that they have, not the sort of perceived one that we have here in the UK, which we're hoping to break out of course, in the next general election with more support for independents, etc., and smaller parties. But they don't really have a proper choice in America, and they're such big players on the global stage, of course. Many argue that should Trump get in, he's even more of an ally of Israel than the current American government. But nonetheless, still great to see so many US citizens getting out and supporting Palestinians. You're quite right, Odin, old father in the chat. If you want to know who's in control, you just follow the money. And we've mentioned before about the amount of influence that these lobbyists have over both the US and the UK governments respectively. Sickening amounts of money being exchanged. Although I mentioned that Joe Biden didn't want the US military to have any part in this latest ongoing assault on Rafah, however, Israel have still gone through and carried that out. That's been ongoing for several weeks now. One of the latest news stories is that in retrieving 4 hostages that were taken by Hamas, the IDF forces have killed around 250 people in a raid to retrieve these 4 hostages. And again, that's just an example of the kind of tactics that Israel are prepared to use to exchange. In this exchange, it's a terrible word to use, but to be able to release 4 hostages at the expense of 250 innocent lives just goes beyond thought. This is one of the eyewitnesses from the raid and what he saw.
مارق في الشارع اجى شحن صف كله اواعي وكله طناجر يعني تقول واحده من رفح يعزل عنها ما بنسوا الا هم نازلين بيجي 10 قوه خاصه ونزلت الطخطخ خدتني 3 اطلاق في صدري وفي ايدي ونزلوا اشتباكات طخ طخ بعدين ما ادريش عن حالي قصف وانفجارات في الاخر انسحبوا خدوني الشباب وطلعوا في على العوده على المستوصف تبع السوق ومن العياده من غادي اخذوني على الاقصى من الاقصى جابوني هان وما اجى خبر طلعت برا ما لقيتش ولا مخلوق في السوق كله مرمى مبطع على الارض مستشهد وراسه.
I mean, any time I see footage on the ground or hear from these eyewitnesses, it really does, bring it home to you just how awful the humanitarian crisis is over there in Gaza. And just quickly to point out how many times Israel has tried to use the hostage taking to cover for the atrocities committed in this recent escalation since October last year is just overwhelming, as well as the fact that they're trying to say that they're getting rid of Hamas. Even if Israel said that they suspected there was one member of Hamas left in all of Palestine, they would still commit massive atrocities just to try to validate these awful excuses. And don't be fooled into thinking that this is a display of how Israel is actually concerned for its citizens and for the hostages that were taken in the October 7th events, because even on that day, they were prepared to kill their own civilians, as we saw at that music festival. But also, as I've pointed out a few times before, they bombed so indiscriminately that they have killed at least 41 of the hostages themselves just by bombardment that we know of. And there have been 4 that have been rescued at a cost of around 250 lives as well. And Phil, you're quite right in the chat. There are way more Palestinian hostages than Israelis. They're arrested with no due process or charges. Yes, there are thousands being tortured in Israeli prisons as well. And also with that, when you compare how Hamas treats hostages compared to how Israel treat their hostages, obviously there were 250 taken on October 7th. That number is now a lot fewer. So when these hostages are returned from Hamas back to Israel, they always say how well that they were treated. They ate the same meals. For example, they were given medical care when they needed it. You know, for example, people were taken hostage who have diabetes. They were given insulin and whatnot, other afflictions, and so on were tended to as well. People generally treated very well. When on a rare occasion you see it the other way around, people returning from Israeli prisons back to Palestine, gaunt, they've been malnourished, they've often been tortured for no good reason. These are obviously just citizens. They're not anything to do with Hamas. However, they're still tortured. That again is contradictory to so much international legislation, including the Geneva Convention. And they're monsters. They're pure monsters. Quickly over to an article. I just want to point out some of the scenes there from Nusrat. So this is very brief. The hostages that were rescued: Noah Argadmani, 26, Alog Mir Yan, 22, Andrei Kozlov, and Shlomi Ziv were abducted from the Nova Music Festival on 7th October. Of course, that's where Israel, the IDF, were more than happy to shoot their own citizens as well. So they've been returned to Israel. Israel claimed that fewer than 100 people died in the operation, but the Gaza Health Ministry, whose facts and figures overwhelmingly turn out to be very accurate, say 274. So that's way over 250, as I said earlier. But if those numbers were confirmed, the article says it would make it one of the deadliest days of the conflict so far. People living in densely populated area have described the terror of coming under intense bombardment and heavy gunfire. And we saw that clip from the witness earlier. Another witness said afterwards people's bodies were in pieces, scattered in the streets, and blood stained the walls. I'll be honest, this is another one of those occasions where I've seen footage from the scene going around social media that's far too graphic to show on a YouTube live stream. But again, it's been absolutely stomach-churning stuff beyond description. There's been mounting criticism, the article says, of the deadly cost of the operation inside Gaza, with EU Foreign Affairs Chief Joseph Borrell saying he condemned it in the strongest terms. Netanyahu, regardless of that, has nonetheless, a few weeks ago, gone in front of the world in a press conference and said, frankly, he doesn't care what any international legislation says, what any international court says. He's just totally exposed himself for being the fanatic that he is. So that's the latest on that one. There's another clip that I came across as well. This is a really powerful statement from some kids in Palestine, just what they feel about what's been going on as well. And obviously so many innocent women and children have been killed in this conflict, but this testimony really does say a lot, and it does cut close to the heart. And it's a very brave, bold statement as well. You know, the kid who's going to be giving this testimony looks about 10 years old, and he does it in English. Don't know how good your foreign languages were when you were his age, but as I pointed out before, Palestinians do have one of the highest literacy rates in the world, and also one of the highest number of citizens with degrees, etc., per capita. But very brave of him to stand up and basically tell the world exactly what's going on. Let's hear from that.
Since the 7th of October, we face extermination, killing, bombing falling over our heads. All of this of front of the world. They lie to the world that they kill the parties, but they kill the people of Gaza, their dreams and their future. Kids of Gaza run out of death once and once. We come to Al-Shifa hospital to keep us from bombing. We suddenly run out of death more after bombing the hospital. The occupation is starving us. We don't find water, food, and we drink from the unusable water. We come now to shout and invite you to protect us. We want to live, we want peace, we want to judge the killers of children. We want medicine, food and education. And we want to live as the other children live.
Very brave. Very brave. And you can see from the faces on all of those kids, they've been through unimaginable circumstances, been witness to unspeakable events, and we can't leave them behind. We can't leave people behind while this suffering goes on. So again, just a reminder to do everything that you can to call for a ceasefire in Gaza and stop this awful occupation from taking place. And one of the reasons that such extreme things are happening in this area of the world is how members of the IDF and the Israeli population in general are indoctrinated into this ideology, this Zionist ideology, which is in itself racist and genocidal. But some footage has come up recently of how people who attend the IDF academy are subjected to this kind of extreme ideology concerning occupation and a complete collective punishment and eradication of a people, and it's drilled into them from the very beginning. So this rep from the IDF is at one of these academies talking to young people who have just signed up, and this is the kind of ideology that we're up against here, and it's startlingly, scarily reminiscent of previous ideologies that have led to global conflict, shall we say.
ביום שאחרי, כי אני שמעתי שעדיין יש שמאלנים בארץ, ועדיין יש כאלה אנשים שמפחדים מהאום ושמו, ועדיין רוצים להתייחס לאירופה, וכל מיני לחצים אמיתיים, זה לא איזה דמיון, זה באמת מורכב. אתה יודע שמבחינה לאומית, בינלאומית, לא בטוח שיתנו לך להקים את גוש כתף, נכון? כמה הם חושבים שזה יקרה ביום שאחרי? אני מניח שעדיין האחוזים פה, בקרב אנשים שכולם רוצים את זה, עדיין יגידו שזה לא יקרה מיד אחרי. אז השאלה היא מאוד פשוטה, מהי תמונת הניצחון שלכם? מאוד פשוט. 3 מילים. שנייה, תחשוב על זה. פינוי גירוש התיישבות, מעולה, אחלה תשובה. כן, לחזור לגוש קטיף, מעולה, אחלה תשובה.
Expel, deport and settle. That's all that they live by. Expel, deport and settle. So he's putting the question out now to the attendees. What is your picture of a victory of Hamas? Just to sort of testingly see if they fit within that three-word ideology.
מה תמונת הניצחון של חמאס? יש למישהו מושג? גם אחרי כן, קומה שלישית כבר של שחרור, ועדיין בסוף אני חושב שהדברים חשובים לכל מי שקצת רוצה להיות שותף לדבר הזה שנקרא מלחמה, לדבר הזה שנקרא תהליך הגאולה שבו אנחנו נמצאים. אז השיעור הזה התעורר מזה שערכתי המון שיחות.
He's got a gun. He's just stood there, with the gun, even though he's just talking to some people in the academy as well. This is your far right ideology in modern times, right here in real time. This is who they are. Yeah, case in point. However, they've recently come under even more scrutiny, including from the United Nations. I'll just jump over to that story quickly. There's always a lot of back and forth between the United Nations and Israel. So Israel, the military specifically, have been added to a list of offenders for failing to protect children last year. An ambassador to the UN says. Gilad Erdan, who was said to have been notified of the decision on Friday, described the decision as shameful. Foreign Minister for Israel, Katz, said he would have consequences for Israel's relations with the United Nations. A spokesman for the Palestinian president told the Reuters news agency that the decision was a step closer to holding Israel accountable for what he called its crimes. Thousands of children have been killed in Israel's campaign against Hamas in Gaza, and thousands more in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. The annual list by the Secretary-General covers the killing of children in the conflict and denial of access to aid and targeting of schools and hospitals. It will be included in a report to be presented to the UN Secretary-Council next week. But they're just completely tone deaf to everything at the moment. They've got their fingers in the ears. They don't like to be told that they're committing such atrocities and inflicting a collective punishment on people. All that they will do is try to accuse the critiques of anti-Semitism. This has already happened. They've accused Antonio Guterres, Director General of the UN, of being anti-Semitic, etc. Pathetic. So the official latest figures are that 36,731 people have been killed by Israeli bombardment and ground attacks. At least 7,797 of those are children. As the stats get more increasingly mind-blowing, I've pointed out before, record number of journalists have been killed, women and children in terms of proportion, etc. The latest one that even I couldn't believe, and I had to sort of dig in a bit further, but it does turn out to be true. And if you've not heard this one yet, you might want to get yourself a stiff drink or make sure that you sat back in your seats. But there have been more bombs now dropped on Gaza and think about how densely the population is there, when I mentioned this fact, there have been more bombs dropped on Gaza since that were dropped on Germany in all of World War II, including the latter stages, Dresden, Munich, Berlin, in a war that lasted for over 5 years. And since the escalation, after the October 7th attacks, more bombs have been dropped than in a war that spanned over 5 years. It's incredible. But not in any kind of positive way whatsoever. It just also points out that last month the UN revised down the proportion of reported fatalities that were women and children from 69% to 52% of the total number of deaths. But that's still half. Is still appalling. Appalling that this could be happening in this day and age. Speaks volumes as well. So that's the latest on the situation in Gaza. I want to go over to a couple of other topics, as well as some channel updates and whatnot. Just want to attempt to slightly lift the mood with a clip from Matt Green here, as I'll bring you the latest there on the situation in Gaza and the protests and so on. As always, appreciate your comments on this, whether it's on videos, live streams, etc. Obviously, this is something that we have to keep talking about, and there are so many topics in today's political world, but this is certainly one that we can't let slip by and go unnoticed.
מה, ביום שאחרי?
Apologies.
כי אני שמעתי שעדיין יש שמאלנים בארץ, ועדיין יש כאלה אנשים...
Okay, so this is something slightly more light-hearted. Someone who's featured regularly on the channel as well. Sure you're all familiar with him by now, Matt Green. Great comedian. Check out his stuff if you've not done so already. And I'll be back with you after this short skit from Matt Green.
The Prime Minister has been forced to apologise after leaving the D-Day commemoration events early. Our blunders, missteps and jaw-dropping incompetence correspondent, Jonathan Goodenough, has more. Yes, that's right, as leaders from across the world gathered in northern France to pay their respects to the almost incomprehensible bravery and sacrifices made 80 years ago, Rishi Sunak popped in, then left early, like he was showing his face at a party for one of his wife's friends. What did he have to get back for? An interview for ITN, in which he responded to claims that he lied about Labour's tax plans. So he tried to fix one campaign scandal by causing an even bigger one. Yes, it was essentially a gaffe squared. He then denied that he would lie in order to win an election, which is in itself a lie. So perhaps it was actually a rarely seen gaffe cubed. What's been the reaction? People have barely noticed. Really? No, I was joking. It's been an absolute disaster. Right. In fact, just a moment ago, I received a WhatsApp from a minister which reads, and I quote, FFS, this is the single stupidest political decision I've ever seen up close, and you have to remember that I worked with both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. We are doomed, doomed, doomed. Gosh. And bear in mind that I have had to clean that up quite significantly because it contains several swear words and spelling mistakes, because I think he might be quite drunk. So why was this such a bad decision? Well, for a campaign that has focused squarely on attracting an older, reform-considering demographic, it's hard to think of a worse look. It would be like the leader of the SNP wearing an England shirt at the Euros, or the leader of the Green Party slapping Greta Thunberg on a private jet. Or the leader of the Labour Party praising Margaret Thatcher. No, that helps him, for some reason. So how do you think this happened? Well, as ever, there are a number of lurid theories spreading online. Some people have suggested that after shorting the British economy, Sunak is now shorting his own government, deliberately trying to lose badly because he's put some sort of bet on that outcome. Gosh. Or he's part of a Brewster's Millions style plot where he has to shed as many seats as he can or he'll lose his fortune. Right. Or maybe he knows that the public sector is in such a terrible state and the public finances aren't much better that whoever wins the election is going to have to make some pretty horrible choices that he doesn't want to have to face. Wow. But the reality is likely to be more mundane. He's just really bad at this, and the people around him are worse. He has the political instincts of a goldfish on a lawn, and he has a crack team of advisors who may just be on crack. And we've still got 4 more weeks of this. Oh God, kill me now. Jonathan? Sorry, that was another WhatsApp from a minister. Thank you, Jonathan. Next up, as the parties prepare for the BBC debate tonight, we ask, will Penny Mordaunt be allowed to bring her sword? And if she is, what weapon would you recommend for Angela Rayner?
Yeah, well, obviously we saw through that. She must have had the sword confiscated by security at the entrance, of course. Just actually quickly, while we're on election stuff there with Matt Green again, something I wanted to point out earlier. Sorry, I've tried to keep everything in a linear order this evening, but bit of an oversight on this one. So I noticed a tweet earlier. Yes, it's still Twitter, so this is from a Labour campaigner. I was actually really pleased that they were out campaigning and were joined by what he describes as a Labour legend, Neil Kinnock, in Highbury today, campaigning. And there you can see is in the centre of the picture, Kinnock there. And apparently they've spoken to thousands of voters and will speak to thousands more. Islington North needs to be at the heart of any Labour government, of course. That's on the hot seats list, something I'm going to be touching on very shortly on the stream. Like I said, we've got a lot to get through as we're coming up towards 2 hours now, but just very quickly on this, the response to it has been somewhat fantastic. Now, way back in the early 90s, after Thatcher had been forced out, she was, of course, replaced with John Major, and Neil Kinnock was the Labour leader at the time. And somehow failed to win what was then billed as the unlosable election. Now, I won't go into the ins and outs of that too far, but relative to the 2024 election, which a lot of people think is going to be unlosable for Keir Starmer, if one of your main endorsers is someone like Neil Kinnock, then I'm not sure what to think about your chances. Let's just look at some of these responses, these replies on Twitter. 3-time election loser Neil Kinnock, the windbag, is of course now member of the House of Lords. He's firmly in the neoliberal camp as well. Yeah, I'm sure you've all seen that meme going around as well. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to infiltrate the Labour Party, become its leader with the help of our media, and destroy all the politicians trying to make a better life for the dirty peasants. I won't put on the Prince Charles voice there. So, your mission, should you choose to accept it. Blah, 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 blah. Voting Labour for change is like putting on a new hat because you shat yourself. Yeah, so a little bit more about Baron Neil Kinnock, as he is now, leader from 83 to 92, stabbed the miners in the back, expelled socialists from the Labour Party, deselected sitting left-wing MPs. Is any of this sounding familiar in recent terms to you? Lost 2 general elections, amassed a £10 million fortune as an unelected EU official who was rewarded by the establishment with a life peerage for services to scabbing and betrayal. We know where North Islington's going to go, though, don't we? Those of you in the chat or those of you watching on a replay, there's only one person going to win that seat in North Islington. It is, of course, going to be former leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. So just wanted to quickly point that one out to you as well. Let us know your thoughts on that. People have certainly been vocal about that in on Twitter. And I will die on this hill, of course. I will remain calling it Twitter forevermore. Okay, next article. We touched on sort of fossil fuel stuff, renewable energy stuff earlier. Those of you who are regular viewers of the channel will know, of course, this is one of my main concerns at the moment as well, being a political and environmental activist, as it were, and do take actions with environmental groups as well. This is something we should all be massively concerned about, of course, whether it's just about how much you're paying for your bills or how much you're concerned about the climate crisis as a whole. And this could be a bit of a game changer to a certain extent. I mentioned Antonio Guterres just earlier, Director General of the United Nations, but he says that they should be banned from advertising to help save the world from climate change. He called coal, oil and gas corporations the godfathers of climate chaos, who had distorted the truth and deceived the public for decades, just as tobacco advertising was banned because of the threat to health. The same should now apply to fossil fuels, he says. And I guess he does have a point there, of course. Tobacco advertising has been banned in this country for a long time. For decades now, companies no longer allowed to advertise cigarettes, tobacco or cigars, whatever it might be. His remarks were his most damning condemnation yet of the industries responsible for the bulk of global warming. They came as new studies showed the rate of warming is increasing and that global heat records have continued to tumble. Data from the EU's climate service confirms that each of the past 12 months set a new global temperature record for the time of year. The high temperatures were driven by human-caused climate change, although they were also given a small boost by the El Niño climate phenomenon. But obviously, without a doubt, climate change is human-caused. Temperatures increasing year on year as well, and it is these massive companies that are responsible for this. In the past, they've tried to conjure such concepts as carbon footprint, whereby the ordinary person is sort of has the buck passed on to them. But in terms of emissions, it really is the big players, and they need to be held to account. We're running out of time. And not just a little bit. I mean, in terms of timescale, what we literally do within the next 12 to 18 months is going to really determine the future of humanity. And those aren't my words. I've used that quote a lot recently, but that comes from Sir Professor David King. I do suggest you check out his work on climate change as well. But I think this would be a massive positive step in banning advertising. Let us know what you think in the chat as well, of course. Or in the comments if you're watching back on a replay. And I guess that's one of my overriding concerns about this election as well. The so-called main two parties not particularly having anything inspiring to do with tackling climate change whatsoever. Even if Starmer comes through on his pledges, that would be far too little, far too late. And he has, of course, condemned climate protesters in the past as well. It's one of my biggest concerns at the moment, in all honesty. So I'll just leave that one there for now, and just quickly touch on some hot seats, some ones to watch. I said we'd just quickly go over these as well as we get towards the end of the stream. Thanks a lot, everyone, for sticking it out with us so far. And this is the latest list. If you've not seen the video that I did about this update, please do check it out. And other long play content as well on the channel. Thanks a lot for your continued support as well. So the latest on the hot seats list: Chingford and Woodford Green, Bristol Central, Islington North, Rochdale, Holborn St Pancras, and Ilford North. If these are going to be the shocks or upsets that we think they are, Chingford and Woodford Green will be going to Faisal Shaheen, whose former Labour standing as independent. Bristol Central will be a steal for the Greens. Islington North would be another gain for an independent. Obviously, Jeremy Corbyn's seat expected to retain that. We mentioned Islington North just now. And with Neil Kinnock on Labour's side in that seat, they might tongue-in-cheek put up a real good fight. But no, I think he's absolutely going to blitz it. And of course, you've got Paul Mason thrown into the mix there as well in Islington North. Rochdale, yeah, that one is a bit of a question mark, to be honest. I guess that's why it is one to watch. Will Workers' Party be able to retain that seat or not? Holborn St Pancras, of course, I would love it if Andrew Feinstein could beat Keir Starmer, whatever happens overall with the result. Ilford North would prevent Wes Streeting from getting his hands on the National Health Service if he doesn't retain his majority in that seat. There are a few more potential ones to come as well, but there'll be further update videos as we do. Just quickly having a scan over the chat. So yeah, me thrill referring to Neil Kinnock in that Twitter post. Labour legend, give me strength. Yeah, legendary failure, as it were. Parachuted in, 100%. Yeah, you're right there, old and all father. Why does this keep happening? Why did they, they're taking seats for granted. They think that voters just have nothing about them, that they'll be able to parachute people in. I've said a few times now, I mean, looking at the challenge by Paul Mason on Jeremy Corbyn, coming from 200 miles away and just throwing his hat in the ring at the last moment, thinking that the name Labour will carry him through and that it's a dead cert for him. It's just a massive insult. Massive insult. Yeah, you're right as well there, Odin. Your point about capitalism in general. It's created a set of problems capitalism cannot solve, but some will insist that capitalism is the solution as well. That covers so many issues, but just quickly going back to the topic of climate change as well, and how you'll often hear from not just climate change deniers, but capitalists in general, who try and point out that, oh, we've got so much of the economy invested in fossil fuels that we can't possibly just stop using them. We've become dependent on something that is destroying us environmentally and financially. And it's just the complete institutionalization of it. It's almost psychotic. you know, that they'll persist. And that's just one example of many. Obviously, the infrastructure of distribution of pay, you know, owning the means of production, etc., of course, comes into all of that. And it would be interesting if Starmer lost his seat, like you're saying there as well. Odin Allfather, like really, really, really hoping that that one comes true. The Islington North one is going to be the real popcorn moment. Small recompenses, obviously. This is a complete dumpster fire of an election. However, there is optimism to be taken from it. You know, every election is an opportunity for the public voice to be heard. And if enough of the public go out and show that they're sick of the main parties, then that can make a real difference to the system. Also, people within their vote should highlight how they're sick of the system itself and want to move away from first past the post and into a more representative voting system, for example. But this is a real chance. This is a real chance. And I hope that people do take that chance, like I said before, go for a socialist independent or grassroots candidate, or the Green Party, who are standing in most of the seats. They were initially standing in all of them. They've withdrawn candidates from one or two, just a handful, but will be standing in most of the seats as well. But do take that opportunity and don't just hold your nose and vote for Labour and expect any change, because regular viewers of My Left Eye here will be more than aware of why it won't bring any real change at all, and it'll just feed us more of the same. This list will be amended and updated as we get closer, of course. I'm going to be checking out some of your suggestions as well. Lancaster's one of the ones that came up this evening, so I will take a look at that one. One thing I've not done with this, obviously the Tories are going to take a massive drubbing at the election. It'd be far too easy for me to just assume that in Tory marginals that Labour are going to come along and take it. The sort of concept of the hot seats itself will be where that trend is going to be booked, but also where Labour are going to lose seats out at the back end while they're going to be making gains in other seats, obviously, against the Tories. But they'll be treading water in other areas and making losses as well as gains. It's not just going to be 100% gains for Labour. That's guaranteed. That's not just the vibe that I'm getting. All right, we had a clip from Jonathan Pye earlier. I'm just going to queue up another one from him as well. And then we're going to start to bring the live stream to a close with more shout outs to members, etc. But please do stay with us right till the very end. Take it away, Jonathan.
For over a generation, it has nationally been the second biggest concern of most voters. So in the second part of our series of election specials, tonight we're looking at immigration. Immigration. It'd be worse under Labour though, wouldn't it? Immigration would be worse under Labour, Christ. Worse, obviously. Immigration, worse under Labour. I've got all these wankers on my Twitter feed saying, well, it'd be worse under Labour, wouldn't it? I mean, how do you know? How the fuck did you figure that one out? Oh, it'd be worse under Labour, immigration. That statement implies that the Tories have had some sort of control on the situation, that they've been taking immigration seriously for the past 14 years, rather than using it as a slogan to keep the flag shaggers happy. Oh, tough on immigration. Oh, taking back control. Stop the boats. 14 years of tough talk and performative cruelty, and yet illegal immigration hasn't been this out of control since the Vikings invaded, probably. If a single Tory this election campaign promises they'll control our borders and get net migration under control, they are lying to you. In 2010, David Cameron promised to get net migration down to tens of thousands. It didn't happen. 2015, the pledge was repeated. It didn't happen. 2017, Theresa May promised the same. 2019, same again. Yet net migration is now double what it was in 2015. The year before, we all voted to take back control, presumably, of our borders. They've spent their years in government workshopping and blue sky thinking the most cruel and unusual ways to punish asylum seekers rather than simply processing their applications in a timely manner, which would be cheaper, easier and more efficient. Let's stick them on a barge with an amusing name. Yeah. Let's infect them with deadly Legionella. Let's force them all into the sex trade. Let's just watch them all drown. Tory policy has for some time been the following: deliberately and knowingly bring the immigration service to its knees so that asylum seekers have next to no reasonable means to claim legal asylum, so they have to do it illegally. Then we can publicly punish and shame them, and that will put others off coming here. I mean, it sounds like a plan, but it's a plan that has not worked. Clearly. We were told that Brexit would stop illegal immigrants. We are told that if we left the European Court of Human Rights, that would solve our problems, that changing the definition of asylum because it's exploited by lefty lawyers will solve the problem. We were told that ending freedom of movement was the magic bullet. We were told that that barge would stop the boats. And even though UK ministers were warned by their own advisors that the Rwandan government tortures and kills political opponents, we were told that spending £120 million not to send anyone to Rwanda was a sensible policy for a happier Britain. None of it has worked. The only way to take back control of our borders is an immigration service that is properly funded, free of expensive gimmicks, and that is fit for purpose. Nothing you do will work until the system is repaired. And I'm not saying open up our borders. I'm not saying let the fuckers in and take our jobs. I'm not saying we should encourage young men from minorities to join a grooming gang. I'm saying treat the subject with the seriousness it deserves. It's complex, it's divisive and difficult to solve. And just referring to immigrants as swarms, an invasion, a flood of marauders doesn't achieve anything. The hostile environment policy doesn't work. Just causing fear and resentment isn't an immigration policy. In government, both Labour, when they were in government all those many years ago, and the Tories could have chosen stronger immigration control, but they didn't. Why? Because immigration actually makes life easier for politicians. Immigration makes it easy for politicians not to invest, not to increase wages, not to spend on education. It allows politicians to avoid responsibility and avoid investing in our children's future, because if you've got a shortage of nurses or teachers or scientists or engineers, you can just get a load of foreign ones in instead. So whilst 30,000 people crossed the channel last year, grabbing all the headlines, this government issued 1.4 million visas. Look over here. Look over here at these boats. Look at this problem that we've created. In you come. Quick, in you come. Look at this. But whatever you think about the state of this country's immigration policy, or lack thereof, what I do know is this: not a single person who arrived in the UK on a small boat is more responsible for the cost of living crisis, the state of our economy, the state of our schools and hospitals, record child poverty, record homelessness, record inflation, than the greedy, incompetent motherfuckers who have been running the country for the last decade or so. A change of government, please. Well, an array of opinions there, but all agree when it comes to immigration, something needs to change. Back to...
Well, okay, that said, yeah, Labour's gone along with the Tory rhetoric on that one as well. Great stuff from Jonathan Pyder, of course, as always. Just reminded me as well about a clip that I saw yesterday or earlier on today with one of the Reform Party MPs, and he was talking to a journalist, and he said that he went to an airport, his nearest airport, I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head, and he said that he was astonished to see all of the people coming in such high numbers, and the reporter attempted to point out that there was surely, mostly British people returning from holiday, and his only response was, oh, well, some of them could be, completely not realising that all of the routes have been cut off by air, and that is why a lot of refugees, etc., have to resort to coming across on these small boats. Just the actual, you know, scale of the lack of self-awareness there from that Reform MP, just, yeah, really took me back. But I don't know if you've seen that one yourself. Jonathan Pye just reminded me of it. You know, you're at an airport, mate. What are you expecting to see? Complete bollocks. Complete bollocks. Yeah, and without a Brexit to sell, like I've said before, the Tories are just going to focus on migration and the drummed up, phony, so-called war on woke. That's all they've got to go for. That's mostly what you're going to be hearing from them over the next 4 weeks. But they know that they're more or less done for and take a hammering, whether they're going to be sent packing out of government or if we're going to get a hung parliament, who knows. Still waiting to see. Okay, we'll dip back into the fondue lounge as we quickly say our goodbyes, but I do want to give another massive shout out to all of our members and a very warm welcome to those of you who've joined on tonight's live stream as well. Let me see, there have been 11 of you. That's fantastic. Also, thanks to Phil for those gifted memberships as well. So you'll be getting your name added to this list of incredible supporters of the channel in upcoming videos and live streams. Very warm welcome to all the new members and a very warm welcome back to existing ones. So another thank you to all of you.